All right, welcome, Bill. Thank you so much for joining me in this podcast. How are you doing?
Good, getting fat and getting a lot of calories in. So trying to burn
The
calories.
lockdown,
How
it's
are
the
you, Saman?
lockdown weight. So yeah, I guess we're all getting fat in the lockdown. Bill, do you know why we're doing this podcast?
We're doing this to identify what makes us happy. Food makes me happy. That's why I eat. That's why I get fat. Uh, COVID lockdown makes me unhappy. So I'm trying to find my meaning, right? So what is the meaning of life? Is it food? I don't know. It makes me fat, makes me
Stay tuned to
happy,
find
but
out.
let's find out. Let's find out. What about you, Saman?
Yeah, I'm really interested. The topic is really nice and it really complicated. So I'm just hoping we can make sense out of this as we go along. I want to give a little bit background as how this podcast idea came into existence. So I was interviewing Bill for some research of mine, and it was just an interview, and it went so well, and we had like such a good philosophical conversation. And we were like, okay, this is interesting. We should let other people in. And the other reason is I used to do a lot of writing about philosophical outlooks and things like that, but I realized it's not as effective nowadays, writing and stuff. And we should adopt more modern means of communication. So I'm really excited for this podcast, mainly because I'm very notorious for speaking a lot. So I think I'm finally putting that to a good use. All right, Bill, let's get into it. So the topic we are discussing today is like the what's known as the fundamental or the existential philosophy, right? Which questions the existence of life, and it questions all aspects of why are we alive? Is there a purpose? What's the point? So the fundamental idea of existentialism, right? So we'll get into a lot of philosophical idea of other philosophers, but I want like a very I would say naive view from some like completely not intact with literature, what's already done, like a normal person living day-to-day life. First off, would you say that people suffer from this question, like normal people doing their day-to-day jobs, normal life, not too depressing, not too happy? Do you think they suffer from this question time to time that, oh, what is the purpose of life? What is the meaning of my existence?
Thanks, Salman. I think definitely people ask this question for sure. And I think everyone asks the question. I think it's just there are some people who are easily satisfied with the answer than others. Some people have different standards and people have different strictness. And I think similar to this question, there are some people who say, what's the meaning of life? Meaning of life? To bring food on the table, to make other people happy. Wow, that sounds good. I'll stop it there. That sounds good enough, right? Right? But there's some people like me who are like, that's it, bring food on the table. So I should be a pizza delivery guy, like that's the meaning of life. And whenever I see a pizza delivery person, I'm like, that person's living the meaning of life. What am I doing here in my corporate job? I'm not living my meaning life. So, uh, but it satisfies
I'm
people. It
really
doesn't
glad you
satisfy some.
you brought that point. Usually, when I have this conversation and I go like, "Do you think everybody questions it?" So it's like a Boolean. Some people say yes, everybody questions it. Some people say no, everybody does not question it. And that was something I've always been confused in. But I really like how you're like people all question it, but at different levels. This actually reminds me of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? So,
Yeah.
like at the bottom level, it's the psychological and the safety. You need food, shelter, and like my
Mhm.
theory is that the last part of the hierarchical need is self-realization or self-actualization. And I have
Yeah.
always thought about that the people who are only checking all the boxes below it, like they have food, they have shelter, they have safety, they have love and belonging, friends, everything is there, respect, society. Only those people who check all the bottom boxes, they are the only ones who would actually question the meaning of life, because that's self-actualization is on the top. So like, what do you think? Like, for example, somebody who is not doing well with a job, maybe he's even homeless, like the bottom needs are not fulfilled. Do you think even he would question life?
I think definitely, like if you suffer, in the end, there will be days where you ruminate and you sit down and you think, what is the meaning of life? Actually, you brought up a very interesting point. Uh, there's this video on YouTube asking tribe people. So people living in the deep forests, they're like hunting down animals. They don't have modern technology. I mean, they have access to it, but I think it's just, they want
Of
to
their
live on
culture.
with their way of life. Yeah, they like to hunt. They don't eat processed food. They don't buy from the fridge. They hunt the food.
Okay.
And the YouTuber came to this person and asked, what is the meaning of life? And each and every single one of them say food.
Mhm.
Right? What is the meaning of life? Food. What makes you happy? To hunt food. What makes you happy? To eat food. I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. So, I mean,
This is really actually, this has thrown me off completely, because just I think today or just last night I came across a, like, in the same spectrum of existential philosophy questioning life. I came across a point that I had never ever came across, and I have not seen much philosophers discuss it. So I don't remember who was this guy, but I think it was on Instagram or something. And there was this guy who was like, if you think about it, the human brain is designed for survival and not for like success. So like the way we have evolved, survival is the most important thing. All our, let's say, needs, the way we think and the way we naturally give importance to the things, it's all based on survival, and it's not based on like finding the meaning of life and things like that, on things that are not survival. So that really brings the same question back, that if the human brain as a species, as a creature, we are just a creature of survival, then why do we even question life? Like, why is consciousness conscious as a robot or something that is programmed to hunt and survive, to like look survive by any means? And I think that is an idea found all over nature. We survive by whatever means. That's what all creatures, living things, do, right? No matter what it is, even if it's single microorganism cells, survival is the idea. And the basic, I think there are
mm,
five things: reproduction, and I think there were three or four things that ensure survival, right? Food, shelter, reproduction, and things that ensure the survival of a species. I think those things are what every species values the most. So
mm,
that brings the question that why do,
mm,
like, this is a different question. Do all people question life? But even if like one person does it, it really brings the question why. If the needs are
yeah.
there, everything is there, why do you
Yeah.
think people question life?
No, no. Actually, like I like to add on to a point because you brought up a very interesting point.
Mhm.
Human beings are built for survival, right? And similarly, if you look at people who are in tribes, they have to survive, they have to hunt. And when you hunt, you run, you hunt for your food, you find food. And when you eat food, it makes you happy.
Mhm.
And then along the way, human civilization become extremely efficient. That we don't just survive, we don't just thrive, we dominate. We can kill every single animal that we can find. We can destroy their forest. We can like run down mountains, which is
Mhm.
amazing, right? So we're not just
I mean,
like
it connects back to the fact that we mammals mainly, we are territorial animals. So
yeah,
domination is the reason that we know that if we don't dominate, they will. So to
yes,
survive, we have to dominate. And I think for
yes.
that was your point. Like that's why we have become so dominated on the earth. The base
But
point remains survival.
so let's look at it in two ways, right? At the bottom, um, this is surviving, right? This area is surviving. This area is thriving, right? If you're surviving, I have this perception of your meaning of life is clear. Your meaning of life is to survive, to
Yeah.
hunt for food, to eat food, to provide for your children, right? Once you're in thriving, somehow the definition becomes unclear. We see people like long time ago to get food, need to go to hunt down animals. So you have to be fit to get food. Nowadays, you go to the supermarket and you have more meals than any king in France in the past 17th century. So everyone is basically living a luxurious life according to historical standards, amazingly luxurious. But somehow we're still trying to find this meaning, like, oh, we feel lost. I mean, another example. Another example is soldiers,
Mm-hmm.
army people.
Mm-hmm.
Armies, when they are in the field, when they're hunting down, so it's like survival, right? I have to kill my enemies. I'm in the field, people are shooting at me. They feel this adrenaline rush. They feel this excitement. Even though it's like deadly, they feel this excitement. When they go back, and I think you can look at this, when they go back to their countries, that excitement is gone. They have
Mm-hmm.
to do normal jobs. They have to type on the laptop. There's not much adrenaline. So that is why some of them end up doing drugs to get that adrenaline back up. So they get addicted. They become junkies. And it's not just the soldiers, it's also the journalists, the reporters who are with the soldiers. They too, when they're reporting, they experience this adrenaline rush. Like, am I gonna die? Am I not gonna die? But I should survive. They go back home from surviving environment to thriving environment. Now it's like I need that back. I need that back. So I think I'm just bringing weight to your point of maybe the human brain is more towards survival and not and
So
not
now
not really thriving.
now that you have you have laid out the spectrum of surviving and thriving, I'm really curious, what is that point at which survival ends and thriving starts? And like, because I believe I do not have any literature in my mind right now that talks about this, but I believe that there are talks about the fact that the way we are surviving right now is more than what we need, right? Like, people throw out food every night, some gallons, I don't know how much, like several hundred thousand tons of food is wasted every night. So like, when you say the word survival, it means like, oh, I'm a hunter, I live in a cave, I go out, I kill a mammal, I take food, I come back, right? That's survival. So like, if you have to put it in layman's language, survival is playing safe, right? It's playing safe to just survive. It's like the bare
Mm.
minimum. But
Yeah.
when you expand, when you become powerful, do you think at some point it's that you don't need to kill, but it I don't know how to relate to it. Maybe it's the power has gotten to your head or something, but now the human beings are like, hey, I want to kill you for creating a jacket, I'll do that. Something like that. Where's the line of where survival ends and thriving begins? And is the entire thriving area, is it, let's say, excess or not needed? Like, we need survival only. So is that thriving part where we become dominant, where we have excess food for days and for years? You think that that part is like wrong because that's not what we're supposed to do?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think it depends on the abundance. Let's say, for example, right now, right? If you give me a glass of water, I'd be like, yeah, this is a glass of water. Like if I come to your house, if I come to the core, and you give me a glass of water, I'm like, wow, Salman, you're so cheap. Can't you give me a Coke 100 plus or
Yeah.
Coke or something, right?
Hello.
But oh, Milo, right?
Okay.
But so, you have a Doctor Strange teleportation device. You bring someone from a concentration camp, and
Okay.
you're like, you give water, right? You're like, oh yes, water, right?
Okay.
So obviously there's a difference between me and the other person, and the other person is like, um I'm surviving, but also I when I get something that I want, I become extremely happy. I
Mm-hmm.
think if you talk about transition between surviving and thriving, I think it's maybe to the point where the thing that makes you happy at the beginning becomes, like, you have that luxury.
Like,
You have
basically
so
how
much
dopamine
resources.
works, right? Basically,
Sorry?
basically how dopamine works, right? Like,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, the biological idea of dopamine effect is that if you want something, you see something, or you experience it by other smells. It's some food, so it's cooking, you smell it, so dopamine spikes up. Like, that's the highest level. But the whole idea of dopamine is the want, that I want it. But the second you actually eat it, the dopamine starts going down, right? So that's how I understand how dopamine works biologically, and if I'm not mistaken. So the idea is that dopamine is something, and I think there were studies that were talking about how I think this is well established within the biological world, that these chemicals, the way the human brain is designed, of why we like things, why we like things, as we're using it as very loosely, as very vaguely, like why are we, dopamine effect exists for food, or let's say why, pleasure, I think it's also dopamine exists for, let's say, sexual activities. So the idea is that these are all things, food and even reproduction, these are all activities that the brain understands are key for survival, and that is why it rewards you for that.
Yep.
So now your point is like, okay, when there is abundance, like there's food by, you can just order and you can get anything sitting at your home, and you maybe you walk to a club and there are, girls everywhere and stuff. So like the survival thing, what you had to look for, and then the dopamine effect comes in, it's like it's in abundance. So at that point, where does the survival like end? Like it comes back to the purpose of life thing, right? So if the dopamine thing is not working anymore, because I can essentially get anything I want whenever I want, right? So that means that
Yeah.
my brain is not working the same way. Like you mentioned the example of somebody who does not have water, so my brain is
Yep.
essentially not working the same way. So do you think that abundance of, now, okay, I don't have to do anything. Oh, there was a very interesting concept of, uh, this is a very old concept that has existed in several different forms, like till I think even dating back to the medieval period. The idea was that the human civilization, the peak of any civilization, is when we stop working for survival. So even right now, in some form, we are working for survival, right? Like we do jobs, but even though it's way more easily accessible, let's just say you can argue that maybe you don't have to physically, mine coal or stuff, but maybe there's enough mental pressure that you're, doing spreadsheets and stuff. Still, you're working for survival,
Yep.
right? You're working for to earn survival. So the idea of like, I don't know what it's called. I think it's called galactic or epigalactic kind of civilization. Like that's the peak civilization that has renewable energy and robots and everything. So nobody has to work for food. Robots are doing all the tasks. Everything is managed automatically. So you don't have to work for food. And the original idea is that leaves human beings to discover art, like, paintings and stuff, because they don't have to work for survival. So like that is my understanding, because you mentioned the point of abundance. So that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. Like when we face abundance of uh, our substances, then is that the point where life becomes purposeless? And does that mean that the purpose of life is merely survival?
I mean, I don't have the answer, but I mean, looking at it, if we have two people, right?
Mhm.
And I have a normal corporate office person, right?
Mhm.
And I have, you know, a tribal person. Tribal is a meaning of life to get food, to get food.
Mhm.
The office person will say something different, like to get food. What I can get food anytime.
But no,
So
but he
the
still has
answers
to
will be different.
work. But he still has to work for food, no?
But he still, yeah, you're right. He still has to work for food, but it's like the cost of getting food is so cheap. If in the end I don't have to buy food, I'll just sit down on the side of the road, and it's like people, and that people have so much different standards. It's like food is so abundant. Of course, like I when I was in university student, of course, I know, like, oh, okay, like, you know there's allowance. So what do I have to do? I just have to make sure that I'm in the game. I'm in the university game, and the allowance would come. Uh, I don't know. I don't know. Is there is there? I mean, another question,
I
but
think
this is.
we made the very wrong premise here, that what we
Hmm.
understood was that there was a time when human beings were dying for survival, but now, like, everything is, it's survival is not a problem and we are thriving. So we had
Hmm.
the idea that we don't have to survive anymore. I think that's the premise we had of the conversation. But now the more I think of it, we just evolved into more, I would say, contemporary form of survival. It's the same thing over and over again.
Actually, there's a book called Predictably Irrational by someone called Dan Ariely. He is in something psychological economist, like something psychology, something economist. Here's a very interesting story. What happened was, when he was young, he got burned. So if you look at his photos, half his body is burned.
Okay.
So half his body was like numb, and he has like a disease afterwards, and he has to get treated. And there's this new medicine that was just developed that gave him a slim chance of survival. But whenever he takes the medicine, it gives him extreme pain. So he explores what are the different ways to make the pain more tolerable. And, very interesting guy, very interesting profile. And one of the things that he talks about is this experiment where there is like an aquarium, right? An aquarium or a cage. It's an experiment for animals. So what happened was, they put different animals in the cage, and they put the animals food. But in order to get the food, they have to like go through this complex. There's some work that they have to move some stuff. So there's some effort, right? And they did this for two groups. They put it for animals with the challenge on top of the food, and animals without the challenge. And they found out with some sort of tests that the animals that, most animals, actually all the animals, prefer to have the challenge on top of the food.
Okay.
They prefer the challenge. They prefer to hunt and then get the food. They don't just to receive it.
What do you mean by prefer? Like,
I think I'm not, because I read this book I think 4 years ago. Some sort of dopamine or something, right? I'm not sure how they measured it.
I have an idea about this. Yeah, I think I've read
but they prefer the challenge. Only two animals do not prefer the challenge. They like it straight away. Human beings,
okay,
and cats.
Oh, okay.
It's very interesting, right?
Makes sense. Okay.
So like, oh wow, that's so interesting. So something about it is, I don't know, maybe I should read more into it. Maybe I should read it back. But that's very interesting.
I did actually read similar experiment they did on rats, and it was very weird. It was bizarre, I would say. So it was this, I think, not similar. It was just about rats. So this is like a cross species, and I honestly don't have much grasp about why there is this pattern difference between species. But there was study on rats about dopamine. So what they did was, like, there was a cage and there was a lever, and the rat had to press the lever and he would get food, right? So he did that, and he would get food and stuff. But now what they did was animal cruelty alert, but they put in like pressure plates on which, if the rat steps, it will get electric shocks, right? And what they noticed, that because the rat has two choices: either he will sit there and die, starve, because he knows if he crosses that path he will get crumped. So in most cases the rat just sits there and starves to death. But the rats who were dosed with the dopamine like imbalance, like they were given some sort of injection that really increases their dopamine level. So now the desire of want is so much that they are ready to bear pain for the wanting. Now they desire food, but to the extent that they are ready to walk electric shock and to the really high voltage. But the rat with the dopamine, he goes and he walks that path, even he faces electric crunch, but he presses the lever and gets the food. So it comes back to the wanting, that I have to survive. So I need this. The want becomes a need. It comes all to that. And I think this actually connects back to the point that you mentioned about soldiers. When they come back, they feel very weird, and they don't have the dopamine effect that they had earlier. So that makes me question, like, do you think that's because when that dopamine thing is gone, when you don't have to fight for food, when you don't have to fight for survival, you can just sit here, you can just think about it, and you have everything you want, right? Like the problem we faced earlier was that even in the modern world, you have to work, right? So that was the problem that we faced earlier with the premise. But now let's assume like you don't have to work at all, right? It's like unlimited food, unlimited, whatever form of pleasure you can think about. So there is no essentially dopamine ever happening. So if you relate it to the soldiers wanting dopamine, which is essentially wanting to chase something, wanting the thrill in life, do you think like that's what's happening, that when that dopamine thing is not there, when there is no thrill to life and there is no challenge to life, then we become purposeless, and that is the point where we start questioning existence. Because like you mentioned, the people in tribe, they think, okay, we know the purpose, it's food, but now the food is there, everything is already there, there is no challenge in life. Do you think that is the point where we start questioning that what is the purpose of life?
Yeah, I think so. It's like when you have everything already, when you get, you snap your fingers, if you're Thanos, you snap your fingers, you get what you want, right? Then what does Thanos do? Thanos is like, okay, what's the purpose of life? I'm gonna go farm.
Yeah, I
I don't
get it.
know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, uh, I mean, is there a way? I mean, there's two ways to think about it, right?
Mhm.
For me, I'm not sure if this is considered dystopian, but have you watched Wall-E?
I think long ago, I don't remember properly, but
Or,
I know the
or
premise.
okay, so the premise of Wall-E is humans have become so advanced,
Mhm.
right? They live in space and they just sit in their chairs. They don't have to move. If they
Oh,
want food, they'll
metaverse.
get food. Yeah. In
Metaverse.
order to talk to metaverse, right? In
Okay.
order to get food, the food will more than metaverse, right? The food will come to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And like and they, I mean, they seem happy, to be honest. I mean, they're fat, but they're happy, right? But then I have a further question down the line. That means that if you're happy all the time,
Mhm.
can you sustain that happiness? Because sometimes you need sadness to contrast.
Yeah.
Like even cameras need photographers will know what I mean. Even cameras need a white balance to compare how white a white is.
Mhm.
Um,
I strongly
and
agree with that, actually. We in philosophy we have something called the theory of two extremes, which says that our measures of something can only exist if there is something to compare it to. Like beauty only exists because there are things that are not beautiful. So if everything is beautiful, then beauty does not exist itself. So yeah,
agree.
contrast is what makes things have some sort of measurement.
I agree. I agree. I fully agree with that. I fully agree. Uh, so similar to I just posted about the latest BMW.
Yeah.
I've seen how ugly it is. So like feel free to vote. Okay. Yeah, talking about the BMW M4, I don't like it.
Is is
Anyways,
is beauty subjective or not? That's a topic for another podcast.
it is subjective. Okay, all right. But
Okay.
we can talk about it some other time.
Okay.
Another one is um, another one is like this, right? If the purpose of life is to feel good, but you
Mhm.
feel this optimism. So like when you're born, you're not born as a bag full of water, right? You're born with a brain that has programmed something inside you. Like you like I don't know how to explain this, but I was looking at my niece, right? And I'm like, okay, that's a new human being. It's a weird way to say niece, right? But that's a new human being.
I
But
understand you.
there are some like why doesn't she act like a cat? When my cat was born, she doesn't act like that. So there's some human programs, if you think about it, right, installed in her brain, right? So she's not an empty slate. And the human programs for thousands of years is programmed to always be motivated to what the human body wants. If you hunt food, you get dopamine.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
eat food, you get dopamine.
Okay.
Basically dopamine, right? If you have sex, you have dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, you don't need to do that. We have something called drugs, right? You take drugs, you'll
Okay.
get the dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
So another conversation that we can have is it wrong to get drugs? Well, the reason they take drugs and the reason you live
Yeah.
is basically the same thing.
Yeah. So I see, like, I think Socrates, I think he had this idea which he later discarded because it's very weird, that you simplify things to the extent, to their fundamental idea. I think that's what gave birth to the Greek kinetic theory, that, that everything is divisible to the point that, the undivisible comes, the fundamental, which was atom later on. But the idea is everything, even abstract ideas, are all, they just come down to the same building blocks. So I see this concept as that when you talk about these things like food, survival, the idea is that there are chemicals in your brain that need to be released. So you eat food to release those chemicals, you have sex to release those chemicals, whatever you do. And that was what I was referring to earlier, that the brain, these, what are these chemicals basically? It's the brain rewarding you for doing the activities that the brain understands that are essential for your survival. So that's
Mm.
the idea, right? Why do I need to run and hunt to catch a mammal or a woman to get those chemicals when I can just take this pill and get those chemicals? So yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
that was, yeah. How do you say that?
Yeah.
Which one is right,
Um,
which one is wrong?
I mean, I mean, the question was right. Like, wow, like. So I'll have let's imagine my brother's over here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my brother's like, oh, let's go on the ATV. Let's go on the ATV. I'm like, why? He's like, oh, to get the adrenaline. I'll get my adrenaline here. Like, oh, like. But okay, on the surface it looks wrong. Okay,
Yeah.
but I'm like, why is it wrong? Okay, you can say he uses it for physical fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I'll use my adrenaline while I'm running. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm like, but somehow the thing is, something in me tells me that doing the drugs, doing adrenaline is wrong, and I don't know what. I'm not sure if it's bias from the media.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but instinctually, I feel that it is wrong. Maybe again, maybe it's the media, or maybe something inside me that tells me you have to work to get what you want. The working for it factors in.
I like
But
how
we can
you
go and look.
I like how you immediately connected it to that point, because I was thinking about how this is going to derail into a conversation about morality and who dictates morality. Like, that's a whole different topic about the things that you think are right or things that you think are wrong. They are dictated by the society, and who decides. I think that's a whole different topic. But I like how you immediately connected it to the fact that we know that to get these essentially chemicals, you need to work for it. That's the idea. But I like to think of this way, that the whole premise of human civilization is against this. The whole premise of human civilization is to get survival things, food, etc., by doing minimum work. Like, that's the whole premise of advancements and technologies. So, like, from
Innovation, yeah.
philosophers' perspective, and I think this is why we did have in philosophy a brief time period where philosophers heavily criticized science. And I mean, there are distinctions where science ends and where technology starts. And like the technology is the problematic part and science is not. Like, that's a different conversation. But the idea remains the same, that when we understand that we are designed in this way, that we need to work to get these chemicals. So if I take those chemicals by pills, I'm not working. So if you think of it in a very, let's say, scientific way, why is that wrong? Like, if you ask a scientist this question, I'm pretty sure his answer would be that if you take drugs, if you get dopamine, like if overdose of dopamine or epitamine or all those chemicals that the brain requires from other sources like food, etc., then essentially that's how you see drug addicts. They're just sitting in a corner, because it's like an overkill. They have gotten enough dopamine that the human body, that machine who is essentially hunting for fuel, and that's the entire movement. that machine has all the fuel already, so it does not feel like moving. It has no motivation to move. So I think that is why, from a very scientific perspective, getting the shortcut would be, problematic, because essentially it's like you start a game and you enter the cheat code to get all things 100%. You get all the weapons, you
Yeah.
finish all the levels in the 1 second. So then it's like, okay, what do I
Yeah.
do now? Like, then what is the purpose of life if not the challenge?
Yeah. 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 I like that analogy. I like that. Like, yeah, I would play a game, right? And I'll be like, okay, let's use the cheat code. But where's the fun in that?
Yeah.
You want to start a game from level zero. You want to be level zero first. You don't want to, if you're the boss at the beginning, I'm like, oh, now it's so boring. It's so boring. And I think part of the answer lies there as well.
But it's
I
interesting how it's, from a, if you put it on paper, it sounds very weird that I want to go from point A to B, but I want the journey. I don't want to be at point B. Like, it's almost like the end goal is not the end goal. It's the journey that is the goal, as for human civilization.
Yeah,
You,
yeah,
like, when you play a game, becoming the boss is not the final goal, even though technically that is literally the final goal. But you're playing it not for that. You're playing it for the experience, for the fun. So the reason I find it very, bizarre on paper is because it's what you call a word play. It contradicts. Like, the journey can only exist if there is a final destination. That's why a journey
uh,
exists. But at the
uh,
same time, you cannot discard, and because of that, you cannot discard the final destination. The reaching level 100 is the goal. But at the same time, to just express it, you have to say reaching level 100 is not the goal. The goal is the effort that is done in reaching level 100. I think it's a very weird loop.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, I like that you bring it up because
Uh,
um, I play a game called Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. It's for Nintendo Switch. And I remember playing it. It's so fun. It's an open world game. So you go around, you get weapons, and you kill enemies, right? And I remember the feeling when I went to the final castle, right? And I want to defeat the big boss. I'm like, oh wow, this is it, this is the final one. Safe, okay, screen record everything. Okay, get ready. And then I defeated the boss, right? And I'm like, wait, so what's next, right? What's next? Wait, give me more. Give me, like like you built up so much until that point, and that when you reach that point. So I agree with your point. It's like it's the journey, it's the destination, but it's not the destination. Is the journey. Looking at it from a practical perspective, when we're at work, right, we always think about, I wish this project gets done. I wish this project gets done. But a lot of times when I get my task done, I don't get this satisfaction.
mhm.
Like, oh, that's it, that's it. I'm not sure. Like, if I think about the times at work when I'm happy, I think it's when we celebrate, like when we sit down together and say, okay, well done to you, well done to you. It's when we talk about how the project will be, like, okay, this will be exciting project. Uh, just talking about the excitements. The excitement rarely lies in not doing anything. If at work I don't do anything at all, it's not exciting. But if there's too much to do, again, I'm making this topic very practical. If there's too much to do, then sometimes it can get depressing, right? Sometimes it can get depressing. So I'm like, where is the line? So no work at all, no excitement. Work, some excitement. Too much work, depression. Work complete, nothing. So it's like, I don't know. It's just so interesting.
I know. I
Like,
really want to, from a very practical perspective. I want to, because the first idea that you said, no work at all, it's not excitement. I want to know, like, is that true? Because it's like procrastination. Why does it exist? Like, you're running away from work, right? And, like, you can argue that there is a saturation point of procrastination. Like you're lying in your bed playing video games, but there will come a time where you'll be like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? Like, first off, do you agree with this idea? Is this the
Yeah,
way?
yeah, 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 yeah.
But the modern idea, and this is like, the more I think about this, is really dangerous, because the modern idea is to, keep the consumer intact as much as you can. So, like, you end a game and they release part two, you end another game and they release part three, and oh, you're, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, oh, now there's 3D, now there's kinetic. So the idea is to overwhelm the person so much that, he does not run out of, let's just say, pleasure. So, and I'm using the word because you mentioned no work, but as antonium to work, right? Work, no work. That was your analogy, but I want to see it
Mm.
more like work and enjoyment. Like the Hellenistic philosophy of punishment and pleasure, right? Pain and pleasure. So the Hellenistic philosophy, I think Epicurus, when he talked about the meaning of life, he was like, the idea is, I mean, it was formed a little bit later, but he was the founder of that school. But the idea was that minimize pain and maximize pleasure. Like, that is the idea, right? So essentially, why procrastination, why no work, is because that is pleasure and working is pain. So, like, that idea, you run away from pain and you run towards pleasure. And the modern idea is to maximize that pleasure. But the premise that we're trying to build towards is that there come a time where this pleasure reaches a saturation point where you want to go back to work. Like, if you could play Legend of Zelda, was the game, right? It was Legend of
Yeah, yeah,
Zelda,
yeah.
right? If you could play, if you had infinite levels of Legend of Zelda, will there come a point, and all of them are, in increasing level of excitement and difficulty, do you still think there will come a point where you will be like, okay, that's it, I'm not done, but I'm bored?
I think, um, I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot there that you mentioned. There are games where I don't enjoy it. I like games where there's an end point. Actually, I think the thing that you talk about, right? It's like I think it correlates to, organ organized to correlates to how psychology influences our biology and influences our philosophy, meaning of life, right? I mean, we can end this conversation really quickly. Our meaning of life, let's just have sex with as many people as we want, make as many babies, and we increase our genetic pool in the world, and then we die, similar to Genghis Khan. In that case, Genghis Khan, wow, well done, you're the most successful man in the history. Wow, right?
Okay,
I think he
I
had
do
sex
want to
with
talk
three
about
women and
Genghis
a
Khan.
die or something, right?
No,
You
but
know about him, is it?
no, that's the thing, right? That's why I mentioned Hellenistic philosophy that says maximize pleasure and minimize pain.
Exactly. He's maximizing pleasure at the same time spreading his genealogy.
Mm-hmm.
Successful. But is it moral? Okay, that's a different. That's a different topic, right?
Okay, morality is
It's
a different episode.
a different topic. But it's like, okay, to put it in practical terms, right? We we find meaning in our work, but we always forget about that. And why is that so? You remember when there's school holidays? I'm not sure if you had long school holidays, but in Brunei we have really, really long school holidays.
Summer
And
or
I
winter?
just
When do you get it?
December,
Oh,
like
this.
around this time.
Oh, we get it in
Yeah.
summer. We have 2 months of summer vacation.
Oh, nice, nice, nice. Okay. During those days,
Mhm.
you just what do you do? Do you lie in bed all day and play video games?
Should I answer what a normal 16-year-old should, or should I answer what I used to do?
What did you used to do? What you?
Yeah, I was writing books, bro.
All right, right. Good. So
Okay.
you find something to do.
Yeah, yeah.
You find something to do. You don't like you can't just lie down and not do anything. You have to find something to do because something about just laying down and being unproductive is you have to fight the fight. You have to find the fight.
When you say
However,
when you say laying down, you mean completely ideally, doing
like
literally
like
nothing. Yeah.
on bed, on the couch, like on the phone, like
Yeah, no,
you know how.
that is the difference, right? Like laying down is doing nothing, that is zero. But being on the phone, that's doing something. And the idea is that whatever you're doing on the phone, whether you're chatting, whether you're scrolling, whether you're playing a video game, that is pleasure. So you're avoiding work for pleasure. So like procrastination comes from the idea that it is pleasureful because you're relaxing, you're playing games or whatever you're doing. So I think the idea of
Mm.
literally doing nothing is already out of the equation. That just there was actually a study. It's a bit of a deroute, but there was actually a study about what the effect of boringness is, and I think you know about this. Michael Stevens from Vsauce did this, and he did,
Oh, okay.
yeah. I think I forgot what's the name of his YouTube Red YouTube Premium something. He did Brain something. I forgot the name, but he did the study, and it's a profound study. But he repeated that experiment, and the idea was a man was left in a room completely empty, right? Literally nothing in that room except one button. But when you press that button, it gives you an electric shock, right? So it was comparing how, like, what is the limit of boringness. So it was that after, I think, I don't know, some days, the man would willingly press that button and get an electric shock. Because that was like more simulating to the brain than literally doing nothing. So I think like that zero work is already out of the equation. What we are left with is pain and pleasure. So work is pain, and pleasure is playing video games, or you can say unproductive. The coach in you would say that's unproductive. So the question that we're back at is like, we know that we need to work, and I don't know, we can consider for survival, or if you don't want to consider for survival, so just to stay on track. But we know that we have to work, but we don't like to work. We like to be at pleasure. So what I'm interested in is that, do these both things have points of saturation? Like, we know that at a certain point of work you are burnt out and you need a break. You're working 8 hours, and the ninth hour you're like, I need a break. So you go out and play video games. But generally what I have noticed is that, I don't know, you might have noticed this. Usually there's news or something that there's some streamer or some gamer, and he's playing for so many hours, he's pissing in bottles in the room and stuff. And because he does not want to wake up. You go to Twitch, you have streams that have been going for, I don't know, several hours and weeks, and they don't they do all this shit, their literal shit in that room. Why do you think I have this bottle here? So like, that's what I'm interested in, like pain. And by pain I mean like things that are not as pleasing, but it has a point of saturation. But do you think pleasure also has a point of saturation? Like, at some point, when you're playing video games, you'll be like, I'm done with this.
I think for sure. In economics, there's a term called like law of diminishing returns, right? The more you do it, the less pleasurable it is.
Are you
Like,
into crypto nowadays?
sorry,
Are you into crypto nowadays?
crypto.
Cryptocurrencies. Why do you know economics are out of so nowhere?
Wait. I know some stuff. Okay.
I know about economics, bro. Are you invested in Bitcoin or something?
Ether. No, just kidding. I don't know. Doge.
Okay.
But it's like okay. I'm not sure if you can put it in, but masturbation, right? Okay. Another way is drinking coffee. Maybe it brings you pleasure. Maybe smoking, but up to a point. I'm not a smoker, but maybe up to a point. The more you do it, you have to double, right? So similar to, let's say,
Hey, that's very important. You have to double, right? So it's like, if you do the same thing again, like you were talking about masturbation, it's like the same thing, same person, same hand, same thing. You're doing it literally the same thing over and over again, right? But if like, let's just say it's a very immoral example, but let's say a different girl every time. That's an example to give. Okay, let's stay civil. A different food every time. a different dish every time. You eat the same thing again and again. It's not tasty anymore. But you eat more different foods. It's always, there's no end to where pleasure will take you.
Okay, that's a good example. That's a good example. Let's look at it at one domain, which is the same food, right? At the beginning, if you like matcha latte, right, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna work hard. Let's say you come from a working class background, and you're like, oh, like I need to work hard so I can buy the matcha latte. When
What
you
is
drink the
matcha
matcha latte,
latte?
what?
What is a matcha latte?
Okay, let's say coffee bean hazelnut ice blended latte. Okay,
Western
or
food.
any drink.
Okay.
What's good in Starbucks? Pineapple. I don't know.
Search matcha
The
latte.
drink that you want. The drink that you want. Or
The drink.
Lao Lao, Yao Yao, the ice cream, right? Let's say the
Okay.
ice cream, right?
Okay. Okay.
At the beginning, wow, I'll buy it after I finish my exam. Okay, I finished my exam. Now I'm gonna buy it. The queue is so long. Okay, that's a challenge. And now I get the ice cream, and I get the first scoop. Wow, it's the best yogurt, ice cream yogurt, whatever I've ever had. Wow. And then one day, you get news. It's lucky draw. The lucky draw says that, wow, you've won a lifetime supply of Yao Yao your entire life. And
Okay.
now every day you eat Yao Yao.
Mm,
Will you be as happy as the first time?
no.
Definitely not, right? So something about the abundance, something about the challenge that makes you be like, you know. So I think it's the abundance. Coming back to abundance, coming back to the challenge.
I actually want to discuss this process of reiteration, redundancy. And now I think about it, maybe okay. So the idea is Albert Camus actually wrote about this. I think it's like a very old idea. It's a myth. It's a Greek myth called the myth of Sisyphus. And I think the original Greek myth is that there was some demigod kind of guy. He did something, I think, tricked some god or something, and but the gods punished him by forcing him to roll a rock up a mountain. Now the mountain is infinite, like it cannot end, but the guy has to keep rolling the rock up the mountain for eternity. Like that's his kind of that punishment, right? And from a complete philosophical literature review point of view, I'm really, I don't know why, but this idea of reiteration being a punishment, that's seen like across cultures, right? We have, I think it's the Hadean or some philosophy that talks about the guy who was punished to hold earth for eternity. And we have a lot of examples of how some person is punished to do the same thing for eternity. I think there's some idea of also the sun being some person being assigned to carry the sun back and forth for eternity, and all these ideas. Like the point being that redundancy, reiteration of the same thing. And I think it also relates to the boring point. Like, it becomes boring. And that is seen as a form of torture in, philosophical context. And, I believe that's fair enough. It makes sense. So the myth of Sisyphus also talks about this, of this guy who's punished for eternity to roll this rock up the mountain. And what Albert Camus does in his book, I forgot the name of the book. I think it's something like Myth of Sisyphus itself. But the idea that Camus presents is that this is an analogy for life, that you have to do, you live the same day every day. You get
Yep.
up, you go and, you do things for survival. You come back with what you have earned, or, it can be money, it can be meat, or, things that you want for your survival. So, and then you eat it, then, you're fulfilled. But you wake up next day, you're hungry again. So then you go out again. So it can be a guy hunting in the ancient times. It can be a guy working a corporate job. It's all over the same again. So Camus talks about life being, let's just say life being suffering. That is the idea. And this is why it gave birth to, like, I don't know, Camus came first or Nietzsche came first. I think Nietzsche came first. But
I
Nietzsche
think
talked
Nietzsche.
about this also, that life is suffering because of the redundancy and the reiteration and things like that. So I think Camus kind of built up on that, And I think other scholars, like I think Arthur Schopenhauer also talked about this, the German guy. I think he was before Camus. Like the point being, all these philosophers. I'm getting too distracted with the
No, no,
literature.
no, 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 no,
The
no, no,
point
no.
is that all these philosophers talk about this idea that okay, since it's iteration, first they recognize that this is reiteration, it's redundancy, right? And then they say because this is reiteration, because this is redundancy, it becomes suffering, right? And it connects back to the original point that they think that this is suffering, that like if you think about you being punished to roll a rock up the mountain for eternity, you would definitely say that this is a punishment. So he says, okay, that is basically life. You are forced, he can't stop. If he stops, he'll be rolled down with the rock. So you're
No.
forced to live and push yourself and push, the burdens and everything. So the reiteration is what causes life to be suffering, and that's why it is meaningless.
Actually, Salman, you brought up the topic of myth of Sisyphus to me, and I looked it up, and I think you missed out one key thing, which is when he pushes the rock, he reaches to the top,
Oh
and
yeah,
then the rock falls back down,
yeah, yeah,
and then he has to push it back up again.
yeah.
And that is his punishment, right? And Camus says, is is Sisyphus happy? Right. So the context here is he was a king, and
Yeah,
he fools everybody. He's a trickster. He's like Loki, like
yeah.
right. And then he fools all these demigods. Right. He should die, but he goes
I
back to
think
life.
yeah, he
He should
cheats
die.
death.
Yeah.
He cheats
He
death.
cheated everyone. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cheated everyone. Right. So like, oh, here, like, so he's this mischievous character is like, right. So his final punishment is for eternity. This is a hill, okay? This big boulder, roll it all the way up, and then it'll roll all the way down again. He has to push it all the way back up. And I think it reflects to, again, that you said, every day we do the same thing every day, right? So
no.
what do you think? Okay, here's what I predict how tomorrow will happen, right? I will wake up, I will brush my teeth, I will shave, I will shower. This is certainty. 99.9999%. I will wear my clothes. I will go and exercise. I will try to think of what to do. I'll do them. I'll find some obstacles along the way. I'll go through Instagram. There will be things that I like. There will be things that I'm triggered by, and then I'll talk to some people. Make sure they're happy. Make sure they're okay,
Make a
and
poll
I'll
in
go
the
back to
story.
sleep. Like the what?
Make a poll in the story about if the car is ugly or not.
Yeah, let's see if people think the BMW M4 is ugly as I think.
Mhm.
And then I'll go back to sleep.
I like how the assumption here is that BMW will continue to make ugly cars.
That's another discussion. They have proven to
Okay.
make.
Okay.
Have you seen the latest SUV?
I have. I
It's
have.
unbelievable. Have you?
No, 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 I haven't.
You'll be
Ignorance is a
amazed.
bliss.
They have made 4 cars that so far
Okay.
been consistently ugly. Okay, you
Okay.
think it'll stop with 1 or 2 or 3? No, they made 4.
It's the
Anyways,
Sisyphus all over again. Ugly car. Okay. Okay. Okay.
main point is,
Mhm.
okay, so I know exactly what happened tomorrow. There'll be challenges,
Mhm.
and I'll be happy with some stuff. I'll be sad on some stuff, and the next day it'll repeat, and the next day it'll repeat, and all these will repeat all the way until I die.
Mhm.
So what's the point of it? It's similar to Sisyphus. I'll roll back the boulder all the way to the top, and then I'll roll back down again. I'll start from zero. In this
I just want to
metaphor.
mention. I just want to mention. Like, I think I missed another key information without which it doesn't really, it does not come together. The idea here and why I think Camus is the one who was really, really, associated with the myth of Sisyphus, even though other philosophers discussed this, is because Camus came up with the solution. Like on one spectrum, we see Nietzsche going like, he looks at myth of Sisyphus and he says it's ever redundant. Actually, I will talk about later on that does redundancy make it suffering? Like, because the premise is that because this is redundant, hence it is suffering, right? So that is the premise. And Nietzsche talks about how, because it's suffering, and even though there are contradictions within understand within the understanding of how Nietzschean philosophy works. But the idea is that it goes very near to nihilistic philosophy, where it's
Mm.
like, because
Yeah.
because it's redundant, there is no point, there is
Yeah.
no meaning. And the reason I think the Camus is really, really important here, and that's the key of the puzzle. And we cannot really continue the conversation without this very important part that he mentioned. He said the idea is that one must imagine Sisyphus happy. He's like, okay, why do you
Yeah.
look at a guy doing it again and again and you assume that he's in suffering? What if he loves that thing? He's playing, he's like, oh damn, one row around. What if Sisyphus loves it? And I think that reflects that the only way to make life not suffering is to love what you do, right? So even though it's a reiterative task, but if you love
Yeah.
it, if you love what you do every day, you won't feel it's a suffering.
I will further push it. I think it's not love. I think it's just enjoying the moment, enjoying the thing. I read
Mhm.
up more about it, and it's like Camus is in this field of absurdism, right? You think that nihil. I just saw this meme on Google Images. Nihilism. So this meme is nihilism says everything is meaningless. Absurdism says everything is meaningless. Full stop. Lol. So it's about like, wait, you look around the world and you see all these things happening, like a global warming, world leaders fighting, and when we think about it, it's like, wow, why am I suffering, right? Another way is just to look at both sides and just laugh, like, why is this happening? And I think that's, sometimes, to be honest, I adopt this mindset as well.
Tourism.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, you know what happens, right? Like in we have there's Toastmasters, there's different organizations, and some people who are troublemakers.
Mm-hmm.
They like to stir up trouble,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes the troublemakers will meet with another troublemaker, and they'll cause chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There are some people in the people who make trouble, and then I notice it's like it's like, to me it's like so entertaining. I would just wake up and look at Instagram and look at an IG story of them complaining about each other, right? And then instead of being upset, instead of being like, why are they fighting? This is so ridiculous, right? Instead of fighting,
Mm-hmm.
in fact, I choose to take the different route. Instead of being embarrassed, I actually laugh at it. I'm like, wow, this is so funny. This is so funny. It's absurd. It's absurd. Like it's not my response. Like I have no there's no benefit of me being upset about it. So why not laugh at it? Why not enjoy the ridiculousness of the world, which is what it is? And I think I agree with Camus in this case. Is that okay? This is quote by Camus. It says, "You will never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of. You will never live if you're looking for the meaning of life."
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also like oh, that there makes me happy. That there is something stupid and funny, and I can just laugh like that. It's like, oh, it's ridiculous. So I think is the another example that I like to bring up is similar to Sisyphus. He goes back up and down, right? Do you know that the treadmill was actually invented as a torture device?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, right? I think it's in France or something, right? So prisoners were coming, right? And like, you're going to be tortured. And prisoners like, what? You're going to run on this treadmill, or you're going to walk on this treadmill for how many hours, right?
The prisoner is like,
And
let me get my protein shake first.
prisoners like, oh no, right?
Okay.
Right? That's like whatever century, right?
Mhm.
Nowadays, I like if you Wu Chun, right? Owner of fitness zone, I will pay you. Wu Chun, here's my money. I want to go onto the treadmill. It's like I want to be tortured. Like so weird, right? So people pay. Like imagine all the absurd punishments that have been,
Mhm.
like the deadlift, right? The way, right? Imagine if there's a cultural survey many years ago that says here's your punishment. You're
Mhm.
gonna do deadlifts. You're gonna do bicep crawls. That's your punishment, right? But now, fast forward, right? Please. I want to do the bicep crawls. I'll pay you.
I'll pay you.
It's like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
like
I'm really interested that you brought this up because I cannot just formulate the total, the idea about the Hellenistic philosophy, which is about, the balance between pleasure and pain. That what we were discussing earlier also. Like you're talking about, okay, so in earlier days, these things used to be punishments, and now, we do that. So I think it correlates to the fact that in earlier days, let's say, for example, you had to run so much, or you just had to walk, you didn't have cars and stuff. Even if you were horse riding, it still consumes a lot of muscle, right? So your daily life was, let's say, challengeful enough that, like, for just one example, let's say that your physical body remained in shape. Now that is not the case, right? Now you live such a luxurious life, with air cons and, cars and everything. It's so luxurious that the physical body is not in shape, and hence you force yourself into torture devices and into, gyms and stuff, that, so you take up challenge willingly, right?
mm,
So I just, I want to connect this
yeah.
to the myth of Sisyphus. It's like saying that, Sisyphus invents a machine that keeps on rolling the rock, right? And now he's not pushing it. So what he does is like, okay, machine, and then he goes back and does the same weight on a deadlift. You get me, right? So
You
because
can
the natural life is not giving you that challenge which it was supposed to. So now you're inventing an artificial challenge. And I think
yeah
that's just absurd.
yeah. I think it's we find way you can watch this on social media, right? You can watch this on social media. We we want to find things that are are entertaining or trouble, right? Remember when when Trump was president, when
Mhm.
the media was just juicing it out. Okay, there's so much. Do you know how? Do you know how? Let's say in Brunei, right? Everyone in Brunei is living like kings, right? We
Mhm.
have laptops, we have internet. I know, you can compare standards to other countries, of
Mhm.
course, but you know, simple. You just go to a supermarket. Again, the same example. You go to the supermarket and you have more choices there. You can go there every day and buy different things. And by the time you're 100 and on your deathbed, there will be still some items that are on the shelf that you've never touched and you've never seen. I mean, it's ridiculous. We're extremely luxurious according to historical standards,
Mhm.
and the world is improving. The rate of poverty is halved and it's decreasing. Population, people are worried about overpopulation, but it's slowing down. And now the problem is not overpopulation; it's underpopulation because there will be a population collapse. Uh, People are working on global warming. I mean, it's not perfect yet, but we're going through the right steps. Uh, People are worried about species dying, but species have been dying even before human beings came. So it's part of nature. So
And
I
we
think
have saved a lot that could not have survived otherwise.
yeah, and we save a lot. A panda would never survive in the wild. Just look at a panda, right? Look at the YouTube video of a panda. That thing will die if you didn't save it,
Yeah.
right?
I'm
We need
surprised
to
it
save them.
lasted this much. Like, God help a panda, bro.
like, like unbelievable.
I think panda is an
So
absurdist. He believes in absurd philosophy.
yeah, no. He's part of Confucianism because he's from China. Hello.
Gotta be culture appropriate with the philosophy.
No. He's not racist.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
both
white
white
and
and
black.
black and Chinese.
And China and Asian.
Anyways, okay. So my main point is, okay, there's this book by a I forgot the name, but it's called Factfulness. Factfulness, and the author is Hans Rosling. He's one of the most famous TED Talks, right? And he talks about statistics. And what he realized is that he tested people on a lot of factors, such as,
Mhm.
is there equality in the world? Has poverty been solved? And you'll be surprised, the majority of the population is very pessimistic. The majority of the population is very pessimistic. They think that the poverty is still ongoing. I mean, it's still ongoing, but it's much less. They still think that there's a lot of diseases. They still, an average person who watches the news has a terribly skewed towards the negative about how the world is. Whereas the state of the world is actually improving, very much improving. There's developments every year. I mean, right now there's drones in the air. I mean, come on, that's science fiction stuff, right? There's drones in the air, but people want drama. People want negativity. People want something that they can fight for, and the media knows this. So when Trump left office, there's not much stuff. When Biden comes in, he doesn't say much controversial stuff. So like, oh, there's the media is always trying to find where is the chaos.
Mhm.
And I think it's not the media's choice, it's the people's choice. Because when we read good news, we're like, the world can't be this perfect. There has to be something wrong. There has to be something bad. Similarly, when there's a new variant, right? Omicron, right? I mean, to be honest, we don't know much about it, but a lot of people are panicking. And the headlines is that, oh, Omicron, the feeling that you read when you look at the news is like, oh, Omicron, better be careful. The next thing's coming. People are like, oh. But I find it absurd that the world is such in a amazing state compared to 2,000 years ago. Come on, amazing. And then you have people like, where is the world coming now? We're definitely in the darkest ages. I don't think so. I think we're in one of the best periods of human history. And I think if you have been reading the news, then I understand why you might feel the same way. I think there's such a thing called, availability bias, where the bias is, I've read the news, which means that I know everything that happens in the world. But there's a bias because most of the things that in the news is negative. The news, every news in the world is like this. The news that people report to is this, which is usually negative. So if you've been feeding off that, then it makes sense. But I think going back to the point, I think the point is we actively find challenges. We actively find something wrong. Maybe it's a trait of human beings to be more innovative, but we actively try to find challenges and negativity that we can fight for. And if we are living in a society, I'm just finishing up, but if we're living in a society where things are so good and there's not much negativity is present, we will become ever more sensitive to negative things. So we try to always find the fight. We're fighters. We try to fight. And if you may,
the structure that you laid out, I think it's accurate. It's very accurate. But now I can't help but relate it back to Sisyphus, because this was the thing in literature, and that's where Camus came in. He's like, everyone is like, oh my God, Sisyphus is given this punishment, and Camus came in and was like, guys, he's happy. That's like literally the scenario. So I think that's what is happening. Like, you see something, and let's assume that it's neutral, right? You see a guy rolling a rock up the hill, and he's repeating it, etc. So where majority of the philosophers, they were saying this is suffering, this is eternally, this is redundant, hence it's suffering, etc. Where the majority of the people were saying that, Camus came in and he said, oh no, that's he's happy, he loves to do that, he's been playing with rocks since he was 8, something like that. So the idea being like, when people, I think it comes back to like psychological aspect, that there are negative people and there are positive people. So we're looking at the same world, but there's a kind of people who look at it and they're like, oh, this is suffering, they highlight the bad. And there's the kind of people who look at it and they're like, no, this is good, Sisyphus is happy. So this this diversity exists. But what I'm, more confused about now, what I can't wrap my head around, and maybe because, I want to read more of not only the original myth of Sisyphus by Camus, but more of like what is the literature further done on it? Not only the Nietzschean philosophy, but like for my personal note, maybe there's very little I've heard on Schopenhauer's idea about this, except that he will, he gave a basis of it. So the idea that I'm really, really trying to look into it, that when you talk about a guy pushing up a rock and coming down, and I understand that this is an oversimplified analogy for life, right? But
Yeah.
and the way from where this is coming is that I'm once again trying to connect the Hellenistic philosophy in it. So the scenario is, this is the guy, he's pushing the rock up and down, and Sisyphus and Camus says this guy is happy, right? Assume
Mm.
this is happy. When I looked at this oversimplified analogy in real life, I find a component missing, which is that what Sisyphus is doing is essential. You get me, right? He's surviving. That is essential.
Mm,
So
mm, mm, mm.
compared to modern world, that's like working, going to office every single day. So what Camus is saying is that you must imagine, or you must be happy in the job that you're doing. So your everyday task, what you're doing, must be happy. But the practical problem that we face is pain and pleasure. That, okay, this is, part of my redundancy, but I am not Sisyphus. I have the choice to throw it out of the window. Maybe I'll earn less, maybe I'll earn shit, but I want to be a YouTuber.
Mm.
So this is something that I want to see, like in terms in contradict in terms of like pain and pleasure. Had Sisyphus the choice, the problem that this analogy has is that it's very restricted, right?
Yeah.
Sisyphus
Yeah.
must do this, and we
Yeah.
understand that in real life it's also the same, that we must survive, which means we must earn, right? But I want to see, like, if possible, should we do some what makes us survive, or should we do what makes us, let's just say, pleasure. I want to use the word happy because the definition of happy is what, then again. But
Will you say what makes us more alive?
what, okay, let's just say, yeah, pain and pleasure, I think, is a good criteria, right? So pain and pleasure, your daily work that you are forced to do, that is pain. And Camus comes in and says, no, you must love it. He's essentially saying you must feel pleasure in it. But let's say you don't, which is the case for, I think, most of the workers. They don't. They feel like work is a mess. They don't want to work. On the flip side, they have the ability of pleasure. And we talked about how the whole premise of the advancements of the modern world is the fact that we want to reduce pain and maximize pleasure. So, I think we talked about this, but I lost track that, once again, if Sisyphus invents a machine that can roll the rock up and down, now what does he do now? He has time for doing things that, are not painful, that are pleasureful. So, he can actually do things that are, fun or stuff. So will he lose the purpose of life? And that does, evidently, then that does that mean that the purpose or the meaning of life was this redundant task?
I think this is, you can answer it in movies, right? You can see the movies. I mean, Thanos, when he won, what did he do? He finds another task. He goes for farming. I'm not sure if, do you watch What If?
Yeah, I have.
What? Oh, when Ultron won, right? He feels lonely, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna." Is this a spoiler for you? Have you watched till the end?
I have. He goes
Okay.
Overwatcher or
Yeah.
something, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. I'm gonna kill the Watcher. New challenge.
Hmm.
Uh,
I think
when
we ruined it for everyone watching the podcast. Well,
oh
spoiler alert.
uh, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. But it's not. I mean, you'll have fun. You'll have fun watching it.
Mhm.
Anyways, I think when a challenge is done, we want to find a new challenge. I think this is not really a not really an unknown question, because I think I know where it leads. We know what rich people do when they get what they want. We know what powerful people do when they get what they want. They find another challenge. They find another one.
So
So it's
essentially,
like
you're saying that if Sisyphus invents a machine that can roll the ball up and down, he will go and find another rock to
he'll
fill.
find something else. He finds.
But will
I
it
mean,
be pain or
human
will
beings.
it be pleasure?
You will be okay. If I'm looking down to your Hellenistic philosophy, right? I think it's some sort of pain to attain as some sort of pleasure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because what sort of let's say every time the ball rolls up at
Mm-hmm.
the top of the hill, there's this button. Let's just say it. And then once the ball touches the button, one grain of rice comes out, and then Sisyphus can eat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then let's see, Sisyphus invents hundreds of these machines to roll hundreds of balls,
Mm-hmm.
and then he gets the rice. So he goes through a lot of the effort making the second machine and the third machine. He goes to making a lot of effort, a lot of stress to
Mm-hmm.
get in the end more pleasure. But then this is the same story. Eventually, he'll have more rice than he wants. So the question is, if he makes another machine, again, the law of deprecating returns, right?
Like it will reach a saturation point, right?
It will reach a saturation point where he doesn't need that much rice.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll do the work, but the pleasure won't increase as much because it's already in abundance.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to if you really breathe really heavily, there's not more oxygen. You'll just get like, right? Right? So the next question is, what else does he need? Does he need chicken to go with the rice? So the next journey is try to find the chicken, and then it goes on infinitely, right? In the real world, we're living in an infinite world. There's infinite things that we can do,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's all about finding that next thing. I think that's always the state of human being. I've been thinking about this, and I think that human beings is a duality of two things. It's you want pain, but you also want pleasure. You want to destroy, but you also want to build. And we're not absolutes. We're not absolute destroyers, and we're not absolute builders. We're always true beings fighting between these two. So we destroy another country's buildings and build another one. And I think human beings are always a struggle between these two. We want to do things and then we want to relax. We're like waves in a way. We come and then we go. And I think that's, we want conflict, but we want peace. We want peace, but we want conflict. We want good news, but we want bad news. We want the world to be a good place, but at the same time, we want a zombie apocalypse. We want to make peace with our friends, but sometimes we want to have a challenge to make the bond tighter. I think there's the bigger picture here of the complexity of human beings. That's so weird. It's so weird. It's just we don't know what we want. We don't know what it is. We don't know what we want because we're always fighting between ourselves. That's another topic. But I just find it so interesting.
Yeah, I think that this is right up the line because see that's the let's just say that's the premise of the human civilization. You find a challenge, you solve it, and then you move on. And like let's just say that the entire task is the myth of Sisyphus. That find a challenge, solve it, like, and then you repeat it, maybe with a different challenge, but it's the same thing all over again, right? Now, what the point where it becomes, you know, where the cause and effect ends is, the thing that I'm interested in is that if there is a point of saturation where, like we discussed about the civilization reaching a point where you don't have to work at all, so you can actually achieve maximum pleasure with zero pain. So will the purpose of human civilization become null? Because when we talk about Sisyphus and doing this all over again, we assume that that is the purpose of Sisyphus' life.
Yeah.
Meaning is a different topic, but the purpose is, much more simpler. that like
Yeah.
our purpose is survival. Meaning is a different topic. What is the meaning of our life is, what is the meaning of the subconsciousness. But the purpose is very crystal clear: survive. So similarly, the purpose is to, survive and thrive. But the question is again that if it reaches to a point where you don't have to work at all, you've reached maximum pleasure with minimum pain, do you still think, that the human beings will render purposeless? Or you
I think so. I think human beings, I mean, my prediction is that human beings crave for something. They crave responsibility. So another discussion that we can talk about is, Jordan Peterson, someone I've been following. He says that the purpose, the meaning, lies in responsibility. Like
Mhm,
if you have kids, if you have a family to serve, or if you have a job, the
mhm,
purpose of life is there. That's the responsibility. That's where the meaning is. Whereas if you don't have that, you go aimless. We need a structure, and human beings need a structure, because we're chaotic. We're two things. We're fighting. We need a structure, and the responsibility gives us that source of, like, whatever I'm doing, it aligns to that. That's my north star. That's my purpose. So I think it does go there.
so if
If
I just connect, so do you think when Sisyphus, when Camus talks about Sisyphus and this redundancy of task, and the solution that you must actually love it, and that, if you love it, you'll be happy. So if you, think about it, do you think it's actually Camus saying that you should love your responsibilities? Like if you're,
I I get what you mean. I think maybe not love your responsibilities. Personally wouldn't say that word based on my interpretation of what I read up on him. I would say at least know that your purpose comes from there. Because
Mhm.
sometimes we go into depression, right? We go into depression saying, like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this every day? But I think at least if you know that that very thing that you're asking why you're doing it is actually giving you purpose, giving you something to do, giving you, a salary that you can make food, giving you a rock that you can push to the top of the hill. Doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. It gives it some sort of meaning. Then you'll have a much more, I guess, a better understanding of life. I guess that's the whole point. The whole
I
point
think
is,
it,
okay,
it does
that's that.
boil down. I think it does boil down to the fact, because we have this spectrum, and we have this spectrum, right? About, so redundancy is the whole framework, right? Redundancy is the whole framework, but within that spectrum, we have pain and pleasure. So that, at least that's how I see it. Even though we are repeating the same day every day, but within that redundancy, the idea is you go through pain to get pleasure. You go through 8 hours of work to get money, to get food. So you go through pain to
Mhm.
get pleasure. And we have discussed about, all the dopamine and the effects that, if you don't go through pain, there is no pleasure. I think it boils down to that if you get pleasure without the pain, it's no more pleasure. And if you get the pain without the pleasure,
Yeah,
maybe it's not even pain anymore. So I think
yeah,
the purpose, like you said, what makes us feel alive is actually this contrast between pain and pleasure. Like even when the Hellenistic people, they
yeah,
talk about minimizing pain and maximizing pleasure. They don't say zero pain, they say minimizing. As the presumption being there that there will still be some amount of pain, but you just have to minimize it. So I like to
mm,
see it this way, and that's what I mostly write about when I talk about the my personal theory of perfectionism, because I'm a believer of perfectionism. And people often question, because perfectionism is virtually endless, right? So people often question, like, it's the same thing all over and again, what's the point? And I find it, that and I often say this, that the point of perfectionism is chasing perfectionism, but actually never getting it. Like that's what makes it perfect, right? You always have a north star. You follow it and you reach to a point, but then when you're done resting, you look up again and it's moved further. So like the goal is not static. It's like it keeps on moving. So we evolve, we get more complicated challenges, and it keeps on going. But the only thing I'm concerned about is that in that process, we have created a society, especially because of these technological advancements. We have created a society that maximizes pleasure. I don't want to say maximizes, indulges in pleasure to the extent, or with the presumption that you don't need pain at all. At least that's how the modern guy is conditioned. He wants the pleasure without the pain. And I think that's the conditioning that just is wrong. Like, you want the money but you don't want to work.
No, no, no. Let me give you two examples, okay? I think there are a lot of instances where you make things to have some sort of pain, as in to have some sort of effort. Let me give an example. So I used to work with Ruben. You know Ruben, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he told me one thing. He used to he used to learn stocks, and what he realized is that there's this company that makes a powder, like baking powder or something, right?
Yeah.
A special baking powder. Usually when you make a cake, right, the process, you get the powder, you get the what is it, flour. You get the flour, and then you mix it with an egg. Now here's a new company that says you don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The flour, you already mix it with the egg, so all you have to do is buy water, right?
Okay.
You buy water and you add it in, right? So no need to add the egg. The company didn't go well.
Mm-hmm.
The company didn't go because people want to manually take the egg. People want to manually do the work. Wow, I find it so interesting. Another thing. You go to all these Korean shops, is it like you go to these restaurants in Brunei where you cook there.
Mm-hmm.
You cook in front. You can go to any other restaurant in Brunei and say, "Chef, make this for me, cook this for me," right? And the waitress will just put it in the plate. But you choose to go to this place, and they will give you the raw food, and then you cook it for. I just find it. I mean, me personally, I don't like it because I tell all my relatives, I don't like it because I have to do the extra work. But no, they go to the place and they want to cook it themselves. Why is that? So I think if you assume that everything is catered towards making no effort at all,
Mm-hmm.
it's not exactly true. There are things in manual car. A manual car. Who would buy a manual car? But some guys, no, I want to work on the gears. I want to make sure I can go first gear, second gear. I'm like, why do you have to go to the extra work? But they want the extra work. So something about that makes.
I mean, I think that's very interesting insight, but it just adds a more layer of complexity, because this is how I see it. I see that humanity as a whole wants convenience. Like, this is something very big. Humanity as a whole, as a civilization, wants convenience, automation, but an individual does not. So something doesn't add up. Maybe it's just some people blame it. I'm personally not a fan of doing this because it's very shallow, or it's very hollow. But some people say that it's just the mass industrialization and monopolization, because factories benefit from a problem solution kind of scenario. Like business, that's how businesses work. But the individual does not really want that, but they create an illusion that that's what you want. It's like the donkey with the carrot kind of thing. He.
Yeah, I mean, individual, right? In terms of individual, again, we want convenience, but sometimes we want the work. So, but going to industrialization, of course, we want things to be more efficient. We want things to be simpler,
Mm-hmm.
faster, cheaper, better. Yes, of course, that has to exist. But again, looking back into, I mean, some aspects of human life, sometimes people still want to, like, overall we want things to be simpler and easier, but there's just some things that like you see human beings do, and you go like that's weird. And one of them is, people driving manual, people driving the manual BMW M4, right? So you do more work and you like ugly cars, right? Ridiculous. So it's like,
I do
I don't
think
know.
that, it's not just some things. It's I think it's everything. But we have just learned to ignore it, or just, let's just say that I'm an ebook kind of guy. I'm like, it's just I read ebooks.
Ridiculous.
I don't like physical books. I literally don't. And everybody, people come in my face. I'm like, smell the book. I'm like, no, I don't want to. So they're like, no, no, no. The book, there's some pleasure in killing trees or something. They like the physical book. They want to go the extra effort. They want to have that weight. That the it's more expensive and everything, but they want to do that. And I like to see it this way, that I am conditioned like this because I don't know, maybe it's the era I'm born in or something, because these people are usually elder who tell me that physical book is more important or something. So I like to see that innately humans want, let's just say they want, I don't want to say they want pain, because the way we are going with this to subtopics makes it seem like humans want pain. But I feel like the I think that, yeah, the proper equation will be that when you actually, the more the pain, the greater the reward you feel, you know, something like that. So like you were talking about the cake thing, you pressing a button and a cake 3D prints. It's pleasure without the pain. So there was no dopamine effect, there was no excitement. It was, you got the end product, but it was not. Let's just say it was not worth it. And that's how you are innately designed to work, because and I want to talk about why we are innately designed to work like that, and is it wrong? Because here's the idea, that we are innately designed to work because it's actually very difficult to say because why. you know I understand that traditionally that was the only way you can achieve pleasure, that you had to go through pain, that originally you had to hunt down a tiger or a mammal, just and put exert effort and run and everything. So maybe it's just evolutionary vestigial. It's we are hardwired to feel or to understand that we must have some sort of pain, and that's what gives us pleasure. Maybe it's that evolutionary thing. But then it really begs the question, that is it even correct? Like, for example, I'm not a books kind of person, I'm an ebooks kind of person, but it's not wrong, it's different. Or let's say I like to
Yep.
use that bankrupt company which makes cake flour without the egg. Let's say I want to use that. So and let's say that becomes the standard. So in a generation or two, that will be the standard. So I want to understand why the equation is like that we need pleasure to understand, we need pain to understand pleasure. Why is that framework so?
Um, it's like why is water wet, right? Like I think we, you
It's
know,
water wet though.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Let's ask Nietzsche. Let's ask Albert Camus. I need a PhD in philosophy to know.
That's
Okay,
another episode. Is water wet?
that's another episode. Is water wet?
Yeah, go ahead.
But it's like what we, what's that? Now I'm really thinking is water wet.
Yes.
What are we talking about?
No, like I'll just reiterate my question. I
Yeah,
want more insight on why are we
pain
humans
and
programmed like this? That
pain and pleasure, pain and
we
pleasure.
need pain to understand pleasure.
You know what? I mean,
Tell
this
me.
might be wrong. This might be wrong.
Okay,
But sometimes I'm happy that some people experience pain,
that is very
right? No, like look at Van Gogh, right? He creates this Starry Night, amazing painting, right?
Mhm.
Wow. Now everyone in the world is like, wow, that's a nice painting. Would he have created it if he's not suffering? I don't think so. He painted that when he was in his mental like asylum, a mental asylum. I'm like, oh, okay. Um, would Nietzsche or Nietzsche, I don't know,
Nietzsche.
uh, Nietzsche talk about whatever he's talking about if he's not suffering?
I actually wrote an article on that. You should read it. stofficials.com.
Shut up! Stop talking about your articles.
No, that is very interesting because Nietzsche went through a rejection, and that's what makes him like so, you know.
And white supremacists would say, would Hitler kill a lot of Jews if he did not get
Okay, let's
rejected
leave
from
that
art
one
school?
out.
I saw a video from Jordan Peterson. It's about creativity,
Mhm,
and it's this. He said something like, the people who create the best form of art, the creatives, usually have an obstacle.
mhm.
Because, okay, when is creativity useful? When is creativity useful? Creativity is only useful when there's an obstacle.
Okay.
When we ask the question, what would Sisyphus do if he already solves that problem? So you have to be creative. What are the ways around it?
Oh, okay.
The road is blocked. Okay, what are the different ways to go around the way? Okay, we can go this way, we can go this way. We have creativity arises and creativity flourishes in times of challenge, in terms of uh, pain, in terms of like suffering. When people suffer very much, creativity flourishes.
Mhm.
And then you see this amazing art, amazing portrait, amazing literature, amazing movies. So that is how
Mhm.
you need pain in order to create some sort of beauty. Like I
Yeah,
think
I
there's a
understand that that is like very evidently a fact. We see that happening, and maybe it just connects. I don't know in what order, but it connects to the fact that that is why we are hardwired, evolutionary speaking, to like pain. Because we know that this will result in more pleasure. Like if I make the cake with my with from scratch, when the final product is done, I will feel more satisfied than buying it off the shelf. So this is an evolutionary instinct, right? That's what I understand, at least. So and we know from evident facts, like you just mentioned, that it does inspire pain, does inspire art, right? It does inspire creativity. But I really want to understand more, as in why is that equation true? Like, what is your insight on this? Like, let's say Van Gogh could have drawn that without getting mental, right? Without suffering from pain. So we would evidently choose that option. Like if we could, we are in a virtual reality simulator world or something, and we could choose he gets mental, he goes through the pain, and then he draws that painting. Or, he just learns and practice and draws. So I think the logical answer would be to go through less pain to maximize pleasure, but it just doesn't work. It's I think it's inversely proportional. I think it's directly proportional. The more the pain, the greater the pleasure, right? The greater the masterpiece is. But this whole equation, I just want to understand, why is it true? What do you think? Like, why are these two
mm,
connected?
I find this interesting. The answer lies at the ends. So we have the bell curve, right? We have the normal distribution, right? I think the answer lies at the ends. I would like to know if I can make an experiment, or if this experiment has been done.
Mhm.
Our brains, we react to hormones, right? Pain, pleasure. There's a hormone for pain, there's a hormone for pleasure.
Okay.
Similarly, there's a receptor for pain and the receptor for pleasure. So if I can go to your brain, I can block the pain receptor. So uh, you will never experience pain ever again. So I go
Okay.
to your brain, pain receptor, crush it, right? So you will never experience pain, right?
Mhm.
I think some hormones like morphine, they do this. There's this sort of mechanism that does that. Alternatively, I'll go to the pleasure hormone and crush it, right? Now you'll never feel pleasure anywhere of your life. You struck your dick so many times, you'll never come, right? so, so,
Okay.
so I mean, how do these individuals work?
Okay.
Or I find people in society who's been living with these conditions already and see
Mhm.
how they live. That'll be really interesting. So it'll be a qualitative study. It'll be a qualitative study where I go around in society and find these people who, has problems perceiving pain, feeling pain and feeling pleasure, and seeing how they live. Do they do better in art or do they do worse? Are they drug addicts? How do they? That'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thought experiment is maybe there have been some humans that have felt less pain or less pleasure, or more pain and more pleasure. It's just that something about that maybe demotivates them to do the work. Maybe, let's say, for example, right? I don't feel that much pain. I don't feel pain. If I hunt now, I will feel pleasure. Let's say I'm a human being, right? If I hunt, I'll get food.
Mhm.
But if I don't hunt, I don't feel pain, right? So the suffering is not much. So there's no incentive for me to hunt. Therefore, I will hunt less. Therefore, I will get less food. Therefore, most likely I'll die. Okay, that's one. And if you look at Darwin, right? Darwin takes him away because of natural selection. Human beings born like these will not survive because they will not even bother to hunt. Similar to the other extreme, a human being that has all the pain he's like, wait, if I live, I experience all pain. There's no pleasure at all. I want to end it all, so I'll just kill myself. So again, Darwin takes him away. So what's left is the middle, where we have the balance of people that is they have pain, they have pleasure, and there's this, again, the duality of man. So that's my explanation. I don't know why, but that'll be very interesting to to find
Yeah,
out.
that is very interesting. At least now, we know more about. Let's just say, my concern in such studies has always been that these things don't translate as well from science to philosophy, because science looks at them as a very scientific thing. Like, okay, there's hormones and there's
Yeah,
glands.
but you know what? The interesting scientists and philosophers used to be the same people.
It used to be, yeah.
Yeah, you go to a philosopher and he'll be a scientist, right?
Yeah,
A
it
scientist
used
will
to
be,
be, it used to be, but I think that's the thing, right? Uh, Philosophy is, called the mother of all sciences, but that's where it diverges. That now science, and I think technology is the main culprit, because it became things that are more evident. I think in classical philosophy, science is defined as extensions of our senses. So thinking, smelling, and these things, technologies or tools or utilities that extend these senses became science or technology. But philosophy remained with more abstract ideas, right? And that's why I say now it differs, because we're facing a conflict between these two, at least in this post-contemporary philosophical era. And this is why I'm like concerned about, even though we get this study and all, what I want to see is that, is there anything, I don't want to use the word supernatural, but is there something more abstract than just evolutionary reasoning, right? So we understand that technically what happened was that the nature was designed in this way, the world was designed in this way, that you had to feel some sort of pain, and then that would give you pleasure, right? You had to hunt, you had to do, at least hunting is one example, but in all sorts of things, you had to do some sort of things that brought you pain, that result, and then only you could get pleasure. And this has continued for so many thousands of years that it has become hardwired. What I want to know is that, is it just a hardwired memory? Is that the only reason that pain is associated with pleasure, or is it something more innate? Is it something more um, something that is more, not because of evolutionary circumstances? And one way to look at it is to see that those areas that, let's say, those areas which were providing pain previously, that have been completely eliminated due to technology, do we still feel that we need that pain actually? Like, if I had to narrow it down, it would be something like, let's just say, walking a good example, because now we have cars, right? So you don't have to walk a lot. So still, you can argue that, oh, people like to walk, they go on walks, they go on treadmills and stuff. But I'm saying, like, let's say for centuries we get segways and everything, and everyone starts using devices. Will, we still want to, walk? Will we still want pain if that was, not an option? So the reason I'm differentiating it is because I believe that it's just an evolutionary hardwiring, and it's not innately required either for our survival or for our thrival.
Hmm. Okay, let's. I have a here's a hole in your argument.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was designed for us to survive, right? So it's uh, so it was designed for us to survive. Although in the end, even in conditions where we survive, it's unnecessary,
Okay. Okay.
right? Uh, I say, like, if in the future we have segways, will we still want to walk? I mean, that's it. I mean,
Let's
which
put
part
it
of
this way.
your
I actually got one example. I was thinking and I couldn't get
yeah.
it. There was a time, and maybe a biologist can challenge me and somebody evolutionary expert, but I'm pretty sure there was a time where we used to climb, you know, where we used to hang to trees and stuff. I don't think so. We like to do that nowadays. And if we are forced to do that, that's just pain. And that actually gives me a very solid point. Maybe that was what was missing. If a certain pain is removed, if the resulting pleasure is removed, then that pain renders useless. Like maybe we used to hang to branches to find food, or to save ourselves from other predators.
Predators, yeah.
So, but now we don't need that. Now hanging to branches has no useful output. So because the
Usually,
pleasure is eliminated, the pain is also useless now. What do you think?
you mean the pleasure of climbing trees?
No, because the pleasure being the fact that, advantage that let's say we used to hang to find bananas in the tree. Let's assume, but now we don't need to do that. You know, we don't need to do that. So since the pleasure part is gone, hence we don't like that pain part anymore either. We don't like climbing to trees because we have evolutionary now grown to understand that we don't need to climb trees to get food. So since the point being that when the pleasure is removed, that you are no more getting food from the trees, hence the pain is also removed. That pain is no more. We don't like that pain anymore because it does not result in pleasure.
You mean pain of climbing a tree?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure when we used to climb the trees when we were like half primates or something, I'm not gonna say we liked it.
Yeah,
It was still, but it was very normal. And one would argue that was as useful or as important as walking today. you
yeah.
know
In fact, babies have a very strong grip. Right now, if you a child, so here's some things that babies do much better than adults. So two things. Number one, when the kid is born, they can actually swim. They can instinctually swim because of they're in the amniotic fluid. They swim in there. So when they're born, they'll know how to swim. So that's very interesting, right? Another thing is their grip. So if
Mhm.
you let a baby just grip, the amount of weight that they can sustain
Mhm.
like the grip is so people think that it's a residual of like monkeys, they can grip really
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
but as human beings we lose that because like we don't need to grip anymore.
yeah,
But
exactly. So when you say you don't need to grip anymore, so that means that the pleasure part is removed. That is not needed. It is not resulting in you getting food, and hence we don't like it anymore. You don't want to do it anymore. So my point was that if the pleasure part is removed, we don't like that pain. And that just, that just gives support to the fact that whatever pain we like is just evolutionary vestigial, or it still results in pleasure. So that means, the same examples that we give about baking from scratch resulting in satisfaction. My understanding and belief is that this is also a, let's just say, evolutionary leftover. And, as time passes, as we understand, as it becomes hardcore in our DNA that you don't need to do that to actually get the final product. That part of pain will be, useless. We don't want to do that. I mean, I'm pretty sure there were more steps involved in cooking at some point in, time. People used to do, way more. Let's just say they used to, I don't know, it's called wheat or corn, but they used to, by hand, they used to buy the raw material, the barley and stuff, and they used to do that. But now that we have learned that we don't need to do that, so that part of pain is completely useless and we hate it. But in the previous times, that would be a, I won't say a likable pain, but a bearable pain because it results in pleasure.
So are you saying that whenever something gives us pleasure, it can also give us pain? That part I don't actually get. Actually,
I mean, it
what do you
can
mean?
work
What do you mean
both
totally?
ways. It can work both ways, right? That's what I'm saying. The connection is so intact that it can work both ways. So you can, if pain gives you pleasure, then because pleasure is the end goal. So you like that pain because your brain indirectly associates it
Mm,
with that pleasure. But
mm.
if that pleasure is removed, you will not like that pain anymore.
Can you give an example? Can you give an example?
Like, the same example, like the monkeys. Like we used to climb trees, and it takes
Okay,
strain, it takes pain. But
okay,
we
okay,
knew that we need to climb trees to survive.
okay,
And so there was a pleasure associated with pain. The pleasure being, let's say, you get food.
okay, 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 okay.
So now that we don't, let's just say we don't get food from climbing to trees.
But if I go to, I would like just last week, there's this banana,
Mm-hmm.
right? And my grandma's like, grab that banana. I grabbed the banana from the
But when you
tree and I
climbed
ate
it,
that.
was it an okay, like, when you climbed it, when you climbed that tree to get that banana, did you feel pain or was it normal?
Uh, tired, right? Tired. Like I have to do some, muscle work.
Exactly. But my understanding is that when we used to do that as, part of
So
whatever
so you
evolution.
think it, so you think right now, right? So
Mhm.
you think it's like, oh, I feel some sort of pain. You think that long time ago, I would feel even more orgasmic if I climb the tree.
Let's just say you would not feel pain. It would become a normal part of your routine.
So you're saying, I mean, I'm trying to understand.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a monkey,
Mm-hmm.
when I climb the tree,
Yeah.
I would not feel pain.
Yeah. Do you think monkeys feel pain when they climb trees?
I mean, they'll feel tired, right? They'll feel tired.
That's just like if it's a lot. I mean, do we feel pain when we walk?
We feel more tired than if we're lying on the couch.
Okay. But yeah, that relates because lying on the couch results in a greater pleasure than walking.
Mm,
So
mm,
that was the point, right? That pleasure and pain are associated together. And if the pleasure component is removed, then that pain does not become bearable anymore. That is why I'm saying that if we find like segways or machines that help us move around all the time, then walking will be a pain and that won't be needed. So but it just contradicts with
mm.
all those ideas about why we need like things like, let's just say, gym.
I think this question is more towards like behavioral, leaning towards more behavioral sciences, like what would happen if, we don't have pain, we don't have pleasure. I think there's so like philosophy goes into that. This part of philosophy goes to that direction, in which we talk about behavior psychology. Organizational psychology. How do people behave in these instances? Because we're asking the question, right? What will happen if there's no pain and pleasure? I think the answer would be there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that'll be a very interesting point. I don't know. I'm just looking
I
at
mean, yeah,
Superman,
to
right?
evidently find the answer, we need like a research, right? Like a scientific
Hmm.
research. But I think just to project from where we have already come to now, like this is something that always fascinated me. Historically, at least in the Asian part of the world, people used to sleep on floors, right? And that was very common.
Mm.
So now when you see, like, even like you don't have to go really far back, you see like maybe your parents or your grandparents, like three generations behind, they have way better, let's just say, back posture and everything, right? But for us, like if we have to sit down, we have to like, our backs hurt, because a layman would explain it in a way that, oh, it's just because you have never practiced those muscles. But I think the more philosophical idea is we have not practiced those muscles, and practice means putting them through pain every day until it becomes immune, which is, the idea that I was referring to, that you are okay with doing that sort of pain because it leads to a pleasure. And if it does not lead to a pleasure, I highly suspect it will not, you'll not be able to cope up with that pain anymore. Like similar to how Sisyphus, nobody questions how he's able to do it for an eternity. And I think it's mainly because he knows that's the only survival, that's the way he needs to survive. So if he knew that there was another way to survive, he does not need to roll that rock up the hill to survive. He would go for it. That's how I understand it, at least.
I don't know if this relates to pain or suffering or the topic that we're talking about,
Mhm.
but here's my example. I was listening to a podcast of one of the astronauts that flew to NASA.
Okay.
And if we just go back to look at Wall-E, we see that these human beings in chairs, right, in Wall-E, they're fat.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have bone densities. This
Okay.
is actually quite scientific. The human body is actually well adapted to the environment. If you go to space, what they found out is that every day you lose zero point 0.3% of your bone density.
Oh, okay.
0.3%. I think that's the value. I might be wrong, but 0.3%. So this astronaut, he was telling the podcast that I remember going back like almost 1 year on space, right? Going back to Earth, and then remember lifting a pen, and it feels like a dumbbell.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it feels like a dumbbell. Yeah, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And in order to counteract that, uh, in order to counteract this loss of bone density, you have to work out in space. Here's the interesting part. Why did we lose the density in the first place? Why did they lose the bone in the first place? It turns out, in order to continuously form bone tissue, bones, maintain that bone density, the body has to be stimulated by weight. And you can only have weight if there's gravity. So right now we're on Earth, right? Every single person on Earth right now, even if they're not doing anything, if they're bedridden, they're bound by the force of gravity. And just that force of gravity alone is enough stress and enough stimulation for our body to say, hey, make this bone density this much. So the bone density, you're always fighting against that gravity. So
Mm-hmm.
bone density, stays consistent. Once you're up there, there's no gravity, there's no weight. So because of that, the brain's like, wait, we don't have gravity here. We don't need that much bone density. Okay, we don't need to produce that much. Okay, so something along the lines of we we ourselves have to do work in order to maintain our physical shape. And to put it further, nowadays astronauts every day they have to do deadlifts. They have to do exercise every day on Earth, on the space station with no gravity. They have to do those exercises every day in order to maintain the bone density that everyone on Earth takes for granted.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Here's the context. They do that. They do that extra work to remain suitable for Earth. But let's say we start a civilization on Moon. We wouldn't need to do that. Our bone densities and all sorts of physical changes would come in our body. I think the
Yeah,
gravity is more or less, and that affects your height a lot. I think it's less. I think it's 6. We have 9.8 here. That's 6 Newton something, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
So
number
that
eight, 9.81.
now we have 9.8 here, right? But on Moon, I think it's less than Earth. So which
Yeah,
causes
yeah, yeah.
which causes
Divide by 10. Yeah,
them to, I think, increase their height or something, because the body is not being pushed enough by the gravity. So like the point is, like, if you really look at it as a philosophical way, the point is that your body automatically is adjusting the amount of pain that it needs. So it's like, I think it just connects back to the point that if there is this pain and there is no pleasure in return, then we discard that pain. You follow me, right? So like, if your body does not need to have a force of 9.8 Newton exerted on it. You don't need to feel that pain ever again in your life. That's at least what your body assumes when you're on Moon. Like, oh, I don't need to be exerted 9.8 Newton. So what I will do, I will adjust back. I will, it grows longer. And scientifically it's happening because of a phenomenon, like in more scientific terms, that it is happening because. But philosophically, it's like the abstract idea is that everything is just adjusting to ratio the pain and pleasure.
okay, so here's my thing. I think we're trying to find too much meaning in pain and pleasure, right? Now, I think there's two characters in this. One is Mother Nature, and one is human beings. Okay? Now, Mother Nature puts in pain and pleasure, because like, imagine if you're drunk, right? Or you just woke up, right? You're on your lizard brain. Oh, okay, I'll do whatever is giving me pain, giving me pleasure, right? So your body still works even though you're in that state, because you have this, mechanism, right? So Mother Nature puts pain in pleasure in order to maximize your survival,
Mm-hmm.
right? Have pleasure when you eat that food. Have fear or have pain when you eat bad food,
Mm-hmm.
right? Mother Nature has her own agenda, but human beings have our own agenda, right? When we experience pain and pleasure, sometimes it's not necessarily survival. Sometimes it's something more complex. And how does it apply to the human, common man? You know, is this a useful conversation, or are we going too far into complete useless abstraction?
I do believe that it does. The reason it's very abstract is because we need solid scientific evidences to understand if that's true or not.
Yeah,
But
I think we've come to a point in the conversation where it's so out of our expertise or the things that we read that we can't.
yeah.
We're just floating. We can't go, like, compared to the previous conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's examples that we can use,
Yeah.
but this one is like, I need the studies.
It's just very difficult to say, but I do still believe that, mm, if human beings restructure themselves, and this is very controversial, because the traditional idea is like, hey, you need to stick to the practices that were traditional, right? So you should walk, it keeps you fit, etc., etc. But I disagree. I say, the equation is, now this is an eternal equation, which is that pain and pleasure must be in proportional ratios, right? So whenever there is problem, what is basically happening is that pain and pleasure are not in the right ratio, right? So for example, you hear, you should go to the gym. Why? Because the pleasure that you are getting, food, rest, etc., etc., does not equal to the amount of pain that you are getting, which is walking, etc., right? So you go and do the extra pain also, so it balances out, right? So that is like what I believe the overall equation is, that the pain and pleasure, when if they are in the equal ratios, then we are good. And once again, this is my, I would say, this is my complaint towards the modern, I don't want to say industrialization, but the current monopolization where the industry is going, is like they promote and sell pleasure without any remorse of, is there enough pain to balance it out, right? So there's so
Mm.
much food, etc., etc., but there is no practical slash possible way to keep in check that, is there enough pain in society to keep it balanced also. And for now, I think the responsibility falls on the individual person's shoulder, that they need to check themselves, that if I'm eating this much, am I also walking this much, the general
Yeah.
idea to actually. And I'm really really interested to see if people have concluded this, if people have concluded this in the Hellenistic philosophies, because generally Hellenistic philosophies are taken way out of proportion, and they talk about, when, because the idea is maximize pleasure and minimize pain. But I disagree. I say no, they should be very proportionally balanced, and not like 0 and 100. The least amount of pain should not result in the maximum amount of pleasure. That's just an imbalanced equation. The amount of pleasure and pain must be equal, or at least proportional.
Yeah. It's like, would you hike Everest right now? You say no. That the pain is too much.
Mhm, mhm,
Pain is too much, and there won't be much pleasure. But if you say, can you climb up those flight of stairs? Okay, I can. Can you climb up Bukit Sai? Oh, maybe can. Yeah. And
yeah,
then
but at the same time,
eventually,
like, if there's some person who's like, an aspiring hiker, and he wants to set a world record to climb Mount Everest, because the pleasure is so, the pleasure is on par to the pain. Like, if I do dare climb Mount Everest, if I do dare accept that pain, the result will also be, equal pleasure. So I think if the equation is imbalanced, it brings chaos.
why do people? Let's say
Hmm.
you the you took up the role to become, UBD Toastmasters president. It'll come with a lot of pain. You have to deal with a lot of, you know,
Hmm.
a lot people brings pain, people brings problems, people brings challenges, but you took it up.
Hmm.
Why is that? Is it so that so I assume it's because despite the pain, you get a lot of experiences. It improves your job prospects in the future. So there'll be a lot of pleasure
Hmm.
in the future.
Yeah, I think like generally the idea can be applied to any, let's just say, coaching or mentoring kind of area, right? Or like, education. You study, and you have assignments, and it's pain. But oh, this will give me good job. This will give me, all sorts of pleasure, in the most positive and productive sense, because it's education. So we understand that, the pain and pleasure are equal. So like one can argue, let's just say that, you know i I'm just, for the sake of argument, there is a degree in some field, maybe on how to, I don't know, some absurd field, some field that will not guarantee you enough jobs, say philosophy.
Good luck.
So now you can say that, why is this a wrong decision? Because the pain and pleasure are not proportional. There's so much pain. You're
Yeah,
spending years of your life, education fee, rent fee, and stress and mental, everything. But the pleasure is not that much. At the end of the day, you're not getting job. Just there's literally nothing happening. That no, not enough amount of pleasure happening to balance out that pain.
yeah. It's a
That
risk as
has to come
analysis.
up, that the equation must remain very very proportional.
Yeah, you manage the risk, right? As an undergraduate, you have to measure what type of pain that you're willing to undertake for what type of pleasure, and it's a risk risk cost analysis, right? You
Mhm.
identify what are the risks, what is the cost, what is the benefit they can gain from it. But I think if you were linking this back to meaning, I don't think. I mean, does it relate to meaning? Maybe not. Let's say, for example, right? Recently, there's been shooting, right?
Mhm.
Let's say the killer finds pleasure in it. He finds pleasure in it. So is it not right or is it wrong? So I think maybe if we talk about that, maybe that's too steering too far. Maybe we'll talk about morality. But I'm
Yeah, I
like,
think so. I think because this topic is so huge, and my idea is that I would like to expand over series of weekly podcast episodes. The entire, at least what our understanding is of existential philosophy, the entire subject that discusses all components of existence and questioning existence. Right. So I'm trying to cover that all in the series of podcasts. So for this episode, I'm trying to we discussed like a whole variety of what happened was we wanted to discuss meaning, but along the premise we understood that meaning and purpose are separate things, right? Purpose is what do I have to do, and meaning is
yeah,
why do I have to do that, right? So I think um, for now the purpose is the conversation that we had, and we discussed the hedonistic ideas, and I believe that redundancy remains the purpose, redundancy of actions. If you have to become very practical and day-to-day life advices, yes, I think Dr. Peterson's advice on responsibility being the key to your to the purpose of what your redundancy or redundant life should be remains quite practical. But the idea of purpose rather than the idea of meaning rather than purpose is, I think, far bigger than this, and that we would like to cover in upcoming episodes. So I think for now the purpose, this entire conversation about the purpose is, I think, yeah, that's it.